Hello and welcome to the Strategies for a Digital Revolution in the Cabin session here at the Passenger Experience Conference, part of AIX. This year, it is obviously once again a virtual event. I am Seth Miller, the editor of PaxX.aero, and I am joined today by a group of excellent panelists. We've got four folks from around the industry, Ron, Chris, Philippe, and Celine, who you're going to see on your screen now and be hearing from very soon, representing multiple facets of the connected travel experience. We've got everything from connectivity vendors to mobility and UX design to industry trade groups. And I think that's an excellent sort of blend of experience and of expertise that we're going to be able to lean on as we talk about what all of this means, what digitalization really means, and how we're going to make everybody's lives better as we travel, especially coming out of COVID, and what that's done to sort of change everybody's expectations and experiences on board. I want to do a quick shout out to Safran Cabin with their wins in the Crystal Cabin Awards that we just saw earlier today, and that's prior session. Very exciting for them as well. And for everybody watching, a request: ask us questions, please. You can chime in through the chat system there. Those questions, through the magic of the internet, will make it to me, and we can include them in our discussion here. And also to our panelists, I hope that I'm not the one doing most of the talking and most of the questioning. I hope that you're able to interact with each other and sort of play off of each other and build some of those topics, build on the discussions, and make this really a dynamic session. So without further ado, the term digitalization, it's one of those things that sort of covers any manner of sin. Anybody, as long as there's ones and zeros somewhere associated with it, you can sort of make that claim. But it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what is digitalization in the context of airline passengers? What is the value proposition there? And you're not allowed to say just giving people a connection to the internet.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe if I can start with some example of digitalization in the cabin, especially, and what we've seen in the post-COVID situation. For example, in the cabin, there is less and less paper, meaning that all documents related to menu, leaflet, magazine are now fully digitalized, and passenger can access to this information directly with this passenger device. And this was clearly some requests that we received from airlines saying I want to remove all the papers that people can touch and to have this digital experience. So this is one of the examples with clear use cases that airline have been asked during this period in order to make the thing different and use a new technology, which are connectivity on board.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in from a cabin perspective. Yeah, for me, digitalization is, I think fixing the last gap in the complete travel experience that already has been digitized. And for us as cabin supplier, it means, let's say, the transformation from products to, what we call product service systems. So connected products that support the passenger experience and support flight attendants in working more efficient and being more at service. So that's for us, digitalizations.
I think just from my side, so first and foremost, it's great to be here and connect, digitally. It'd be great to do this face to face, and I'm sure that will come. I agree with everything that Philippe and Ron have said, and for me, I think we were talking before a bit about everything being a bit of a moving target and changing dynamic, and I think digitalization really is moving as we speak. What we considered to be kind of requirements and needs pre-COVID have certainly accelerated and become just normal demands now, right? And I think we're seeing that certainly in terms of what airlines are expecting in terms of the types of services they want connected. Long gone are the days where they just want to buy Wi-Fi sessions and then connect passengers, right? We're talking about the end-to-end journey, and I think we're going to get into it. But where does that journey actually start? Well, it's long before you actually get on a plane, and it's long after you get off the plane as well. So I think one of the challenges, and obviously COVID's changing the goalposts massively in terms of that passenger journey and their expectations and things that are pain points and worry points for now. But I think certainly technology and digitalization is really playing such a major role in filling some of those gaps and those questions that really probably weren't there pre-COVID. So in some ways, COVID's been a good thing to actually advance this journey. One of the only good things probably about COVID, but it's helped.
Be very careful with that statement.
And I'm glad Chris refers to the end-to-end passenger journey, because it's really where digitalization brings its full value. I mean, we all agree that we should not work in silo. I think it's been a motto for a number of stakeholders. Now, how do you do that? And how do you bring consistency in the passenger process, and especially to the eyes of the passenger? You need to have a digitalized process. So currently, all the and I think it's a very important point. I mean, obviously, we are all industry stakeholders, and we are looking at it from a professional standpoint. But we have to place ourselves in the shoes of the passengers, and very few people understand that they have to show their passport, their visa, their boarding pass at multiple points, and where and for what, and be it at the airport or in the cabin. So digitalization is a critical tool as well to enable a seamless process and bring more consistency there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, Felipe, you started with the conversation about taking everything paper out of the cabin, and obviously early on in the pandemic there was significant concern about that as a transmission point. One could also argue that the weight of flying those things around is an ecological challenge. The print cycle to make new versions is much slower than digital, right? A new magazine can sort of go live the day it's done, as opposed to 6 weeks later after it's printed and distributed. So there are a lot of different angles about how that plays out. But at the same time, I want to touch on one specific bit of the results of the Inmarsat's passenger confidence survey, which came out this week. And one that really caught my eye is there is a bit that in the survey that suggests that interaction with airline personnel helped improve passenger confidence. It was something that made the travelers more comfortable, feel safer, feel more secure, and happier to be traveling. And so on the one hand, we have this sort of everything should go digital, sort of touchless, no interaction concept. And on the other hand, it turns out interaction, when it's good, can be very, very good. And so is that, there's obviously a conflict there, but how do we address that? And are there sort of takeaways of which direction we should be moving with that?
Well, I think that do not think that as a conflict, meaning that a crew member will be there, they will definitely, they will stay forever. The idea of digitalization is to simplify, I would say, the interaction that they have with the passenger, and to avoid all the administration that they have to face. Meaning that there is a lot of process to be done for selling goods or whatever. And if the digitalization can help in saving time with some automatization and so on, it will give more time for the crew to interact, physically speaking, with the passenger and to answer to some of the questions. So I think it's more an add-on. It will not replace the crew member, obviously, but it's clearly an add-on that the digitalization can bring to the operation of a flight. And you mentioned, yes, the crew, meaning that there is today, meaning crew tablet, meaning the crew tablet, which is a tool used by the crew to have a clear direct information from the passenger. And on the other side, there is the passenger, which can also interact with the crew, ask some question and so on. So it's really here to help, not to be in a conflict, I think.
Just to build on Philippe's point, I don't think having a lack of physical interaction necessarily equals a worse customer experience. I think Philippe made the point well. I mean, the crew is still there. The crew are still there to serve a couple of critical purposes. But we've seen some examples on some of our European airlines, for example, during the COVID period, where they've completely removed the in-flight magazine, gone completely digital. Right, that brings many benefits, not only to the airline in terms of operational weight savings and faster refresh cycles as well. But it also gives that passenger the confidence, and people want to have control. They want to bring their own device on board. They're much more comfortable touching their own device versus an in-flight magazine or an IFE screen, perhaps, right? So certainly the survey was bringing out some interesting statistics around the fact that people's confidence will go up if they have the ability to manage their own journey via their own personal devices. So I think there's many touch points from the beginning to the end. We have travel passports, they're going to come in, right? So security documentation, immigration documentation, just because they're done on a personal device doesn't mean that you don't have to have that same level of customer service and that same level of interaction. So I think the two can work very harmoniously together, for sure. And I think that's what we're seeing coming out of the survey.
Yeah, maybe we've done a lot of, let's say, passenger research and also crew research. I think it's more focusing on quality interaction. For instance, with ordering food, people feel pressured when the flight attendant comes and gives them a choice between, let's say, 2 meals, where they actually want to know, hey, what kind of dessert is there? What kind of salad is there? And at the same time, we talked with crew that said, I have a hard time communicating because I'm in a hurry. And so the passenger said, I want to use the IFE system to make my choice, to be informed, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that meant that flight attendants said, okay, but then I really can focus a little bit more on service delivery and have a quality interaction. So I think it's about that. It's about taking away the obstacles, giving the passengers control. And at the same time, bringing personal attention up to another level.
And there's a great opportunity to increase the offer and diversify it at the same time. And Ron had a great example with meals, and you can equally think of the duty free that you might buy on board. It's usually rather limited, and we've all had the experience. It takes 5-10 minutes to a cabin crew to find the right product, the correct one, and proceed through payments. And it's fine, there is an interaction, but this time could be also better allocated to better passenger service, while each of the passenger would have the time to select the duty free they wish or not to buy on board. So yes, and we need to see digitalization as a way to enhance customer experience, and it should go hand in hand with the human touch, because nothing will replace this element, and it has to be part of the picture. It's not either one or the other, but we need to see how the two can best interact.
Yeah, excellent insights there. I think I'll throw out one more example about the meal ordering situation. I think a lot of the time we think about the digital meal ordering as a paid service, right? You need to do that, and it improves the transactions and whatnot. One airline, at least, is even for complimentary meals, is now doing meal selection through the IFE screen in economy, and JetBlue is doing that on their transatlantic flights now. And I was impressed how quickly the crew was able to serve the sort of mix and match order of meals, because everything was, the decisions were already made, right? They weren't standing in the aisle saying chicken or beef or veggie or whatever it was. So there is some opportunities there.
And Seth, just maybe if I just make one more comment on all that, I think a lot of these innovations are really items that airlines have been wanting to try and do for a long time, right? In terms of some of these, not carrying a stock of duty free on the aircraft, giving people that kind of touchless experience. And this is where I was saying that COVID really has accelerated the desire or the need to actually innovate faster. So I think, if we're in the situation we're in, but certainly I've seen a real increase in the pace of innovation because of the natural, if a customer's asking for it, typically tends to happen a bit quicker, right? So, and therefore the desire and the need kind of moves along a little bit faster at the same time.
Very interesting there.
And I'd like to just add a point or so. As we are starting the discussion today, we focus pretty much on the digitalization, and we tend to look at the tools, but the process is equally important. And we've seen with the experience that when you deploy the tools without a proper process, the trial, the pilot project may fail. And so it's important as we talk about digitalization and new tools in place, we need to look at the process, including where are the human components in this overall achievement.
Well, I think that's an excellent sort of segue into the next topic I wanted to get into, which is we had talked a little bit just now about sort of some of the paperwork and processing, immigration and health forms. And especially these days, that is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, whether it's going to be health passports or vaccine records or whatever that may be. A lot of political decisions going on there, but ultimately passengers are going to have to almost certainly demonstrate something somewhere. I've shown my vaccine card several times this week as I'm traveling internationally, and it's been exciting every time, always a little different. But how is that play into a cabin digitalization effort? And one of the sort of interesting things I think about that is some years ago there was the idea of embedding little cameras in the screens of an IFE screens in seats, and you could the use case that was pitched was, well, you'll be able to clear immigration while you're still sitting on the plane. And I think collectively, once people realized that there was a camera sitting in the screen watching you, they mostly freaked out. It was not a good response. It was not a positive response. No one sort of wanted that. But at the same time, now we're talking about being able to sort of take a selfie, clear your immigration forms, clear your health passport potentially as well. And people seem happy about that now. Is it just a function of control, or is it that they've realized that the lines are too long and so we have to move to a digital solution? How do you see that thing? And I know, Celine, you guys have done a lot of work with the health passport stuff, the IATA Travel Pass app. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think there's a slight difference between having camera in the seat, embedded in the seat, and using a smartphone to capture a live image. And the main difference is that in the second example, the passenger is in control. I think, we had a series of surveys along the years, and that was really one of the main outcome that came up, or that we could identify, is that passengers want to be more in control. They want predictability, and they want to know where the data are going and what type of process they are filling in. And obviously, if we are looking at the opportunities that digital passport or an application that could that help passenger to fill, store their health declaration and go so through the border control process, there is a lot of interest, especially if it can bring consistency and if it can help passengers in preparing their journey. And I think you summarized it well, Seth, with your example, but it's more and more difficult with the increasing number of requirements as passenger travels to understand what is needed to depart, but also and more importantly, to cross the border on arrival. So if you can have an app or a tool that can provide you this information in advance, tell you that, yes, you can store your vaccination certificate, you will need a PCR test on top of it, valid for 72 hours and so forth and so on. This brings confidence to passengers, and they know they can rely on the information which is provided, and it helps them also being more confident in booking their next trip.
And Ron, you do a lot of, focus heavily on the sort of mobility and user experience and how all these things play together. How, is there a sort of silver bullet or magic path to making that process more user-friendly, or at least consistent?
Yeah, that's a good one. First of all, I think that the airline that really gets it becomes the partner in the journey. And so we talked about the end-to-end journey. So really understanding the complete journey and being a partner. And in the case of COVID, is really taking away concerns and assisting them, to clear all the steps they need to take to travel. And I'm hoping that will change and get away a little bit. But at the same time, if you talk about processes, you also get the involvement of multiple stakeholders. So you should also really start looking at different perspectives from different stakeholders. You can maybe optimize the passenger experience, but yeah, let's say if the crew has to run faster or you create more work for the crew, that's not a win-win situation. So multi-stakeholder involvement, and I'm not so much into the passport thing, but we've looked a lot at catering, so crew and passenger interaction and processes. And so thinking win-win for the caterer, for the airline, for the flight attendants, for the passenger is an absolute must to make those processes really work. So yeah, that's kind of my takeaway from diving into this for a long time.
Excellent. One of the other areas we were talking about just before that came up a few times is sort of the in-flight retail, the digital sales opportunities there, and whether it's massively expanding a duty-free catalog and shipping to the home rather than collecting on board, or sort of any of the other options that are out there. I'm curious, how much of this do you all see as digital simply displacing the existing channel versus augmenting and increasing engagement?
So from my perspective, I think it's absolutely the latter. I think it's certainly augmenting what's already there, and it's improving it and taking it to the next level. And it's, you think about the kind of inventory that could be offered, for example, with an Amazon type of optionality there. You can imagine that that's going to give the customer much more options, right? And it comes back to kind of what do passengers essentially want to manage when they're on the aircraft, right? So from our perspective, many moons ago, it was just get on there, probably buy Wi-Fi, sometimes get it for free, sometimes get a bit for free, right? And one of the onuses that was on the industry, and I think it's something that's really moving forward at pace now, is what is the portal? What is the environment? What is the piece of technology that's gonna manage that experience, able to offer? So we talk about partnerships a lot. Making these environments where you can have third-party APIs plugging in. Really, you can go to an airline and say, okay, well, what is it you're looking for to offer to your passengers? And I think that certainly helps to not only kind of make a connectivity business case much more attractive, both for the vendors and also for the airline, but it answers choice questions that the passenger's looking for, which ultimately where we always have to start from when we're looking at what we're going to put into a product suite from an IFC capability.
Yeah, and to add to Chris' comment, I think that in-flight connectivity can bring a lot for in-flight retail. Also, simply because you will be able to validate in real time any transaction with this live connection of your device, payment device to the ground, which will enable the airline to sell more goods with a higher value, which was not the case before because they were facing potential wrong payment issue in terms of payment. Therefore, this connectivity will be, I would say, a key enabler to improve the in-flight retail for airline, definitely. But when we are speaking about connectivity, I think it's quite important to, before talking about, I would say, technology, it's quite important to focus on the passenger experience, because I think that there is a lot of improvement as well to be done on the in-flight connectivity. These solutions are not yet mature. I think that passengers are expecting more from airline and service provider in terms of I would say seamless experience, in terms of also ability to access the internet easily and so on. And this is also something that the different service providers are currently working on in order to provide this at the next level.
Chris, you said one of the magic words there, Amazonification or whatnot, sort of thinking about that concept of sort of almost an infinite supply of goods to select from. At some point, is an Amazon portal white labeled just going to be what duty-free shopping is? I mean, is that what we have to look forward to?
I mean, that's what the internet is, right? I mean, people can do whatever they like as long as they can have access to the internet. So, that's the biggest duty-free possible you could imagine, whether you're buying it through the airline, ideally, if they can facilitate that. But, I think it's really giving, what people are craving for is autonomy in terms of what they're able to do. And I think one thing I've certainly learned, and I think a lot of people will resonate with this, is I'm so used to being able to kind of do everything I need to do, be connected all the time with really kind of true high quality, always available connectivity. And I think now more than ever, and the survey certainly brought that out, is that okay, high quality connectivity on board the aircraft was a basic must beforehand. It's now a given. I think airlines are now going to have this, and all the different use cases. And you guys and Celine touched on all the new difficulties that passengers are going to be going through when they start to travel again. The survey was quite clear. There's a huge demand to travel again. 60% of the passengers surveyed were willing to travel again this year, right? But there's significant obstacles, and these are all new obstacles and new problems that people didn't have before. The biggest barrier at the moment, quarantine rules. I'm not going to travel if I have to come back and do 2 weeks, a week quarantine, in various different states of, quarantine jail, as they can be looked at. That's a real barrier for people. Unpredictable border closures. If I'm going to take a trip for 2 weeks, what's going to happen in those 2 weeks? People are obviously anxious about that. Yeah. And then clearly safety protocols. What's the safety protocol at the airport? The different safety protocol in the aircraft. Then what happens in the different countries I'm likely to be traveling to? And again, these change all the time. So these are real customer needs and pain points that if we can give a lot of real-time information, via these apps, via the portal, whatever we need to do to be able to push to that passenger, so that level of anxiety can come down and they can have a lot more comfort to travel, then that's what being connected all the time should be able to deliver. And we expect that in our day-to-day lives at home. It should be no different when we're flying.
I'm going to guess that the number of respondents who are worried about what happens when they're away for 2 weeks was low on the American population, because we don't do that sort of vacation.
Well, you can go away for 2 weeks within America. It's like something like this.
Works like that. So maybe going back to the retail topic, I think IATA published in 2018 a fantastic report about the waste being produced in the cabin. And if you think about, let's say, expanding on the retail opportunities in flight, you definitely have to think about the supply chain. We've done a lot of research into understanding the supply chain for catering, but also for duty free. So expanding that, and I think airlines really need to start thinking like a retailer, because the ancillary sales opportunity is there. I mean, you have the undivided attention. You cannot switch away to another website. So I think they have to capitalize on that. But the supply chain is the challenge. And so one of my personal projects I've been sort of pushing for years is optimizing the supply chain, reducing the waste, because that's one of the complexities and unique situations of aviation, is that we have to think downstream to make sure that the things you offer in the aircraft, and of course you can think about Amazonian kind of opportunities, but let's say one of the perks of duty free is that there's no duty, there's no tax on the things you're buying. And if you go to Amazonian scenarios, you're giving away all those benefits, I would say. So supply chain, but also reducing the waste of a flight should be one of the focus points. And we're working on that and to figure out how we can support airlines there to be ready for this Amazonian future.
I want to sort of tease a little bit here. Tomorrow's first session, which is at 11 o'clock Central European summertime. So Western Europe time, 11 o'clock tomorrow. Does that make it 5 a.m. on the East Coast in the US? Mm-hmm. If you happen to be up for that, there's going to be a lot more discussion about retail services and developing retail travel platforms. So I think we're talking a little bit about it from the back end side and what that means for engagement. But I think there's going to be a lot more about that tomorrow for our listeners, viewers as well, to get into. At the same time, especially from sort of the back end side of things, I think the idea of retail as a driver for making connectivity valuable, right? There's been myriad opportunities and scenarios where airlines have said, no, we're just going to figure out how to sell stuff through our portal, and then we'll make money, and then we can pay for this giant radome that we had to put on top of our airplane. Are there any of you, any airlines out there that any of you have seen doing that successfully to a point where it's something worth looking into or emulating?
So, I mean, maybe I can start. I mean, short answer is yes, and the long answer is there's a lot more coming, right? So, like I said before, you know, the old days of an airline just wants to buy connectivity through various different models, right? You know, but the end goal was just to sell plans to passengers. I think is long gone. You know, connectivity as an ecosystem for the airline, but both to serve the passenger as well from a retail side, but also from a passenger experience side. But also looking at how they can actually make some significant operational savings. You know, I talked about British Airways taking their High Life magazine offline. You know, you can imagine the type of operational savings just by removing all of that paperwork, not to mention the sustainability side, right? In terms of the fuel burn that might actually help. So certainly we're seeing that. We're working on some really interesting use cases at the moment with some future airlines. I'm unfortunately not able to share specific names, but all will be revealed very soon. But you know, you're certainly seeing that next step evolution coming, and you know, the step change since the pandemic started in terms of, you know, the types of the questions we're being asked, which is 100% making us better as a connectivity service provider, is really telling.
Indeed, so there is still a key change, I think, for the market and the industry in general. It's how can we improve the ancillary revenue from in-flight connectivity? So it's clear that today, the way that the airline is providing in-flight connectivity is not generating a lot of revenue. So whether it's providing free of charge to the passenger, and therefore it's considered a sunk cost for the airline, somehow integrated in the ticket price, or they are trying to sell Wi-Fi session, but with a different current setup. I think the take-up rate is too low to generate enough revenue to cover the cost. So this is for us, meaning the situation that we had pre-COVID, but we think that there is still a significant opportunity to sell in-flight connectivity services to passengers with a new business model. And this is also part of the innovation, because we are mentioning about technology, digitalization, but in fact, the new emergence of new business model is also a kind of innovation. And what we are seeing here is the third option in order to increase significantly this revenue from passenger by selling connectivity. And this is based, well, at least for us, what we are developing, it's based on mobile operator partnership. So why do we think that it's relevant for the market, and especially for the mobile operator, is that firstly, the airline DNA is to transport people from A to B. It's not to sell in-flight connectivity. On the other side, on the mobile operator, this is their core business. This is their expertise. They are selling products. They are selling in-flight connectivity products. They are selling international products, meaning that when we are traveling, we are billed and we are charged for the usage that we are doing. This is a simple roaming services. And for them, they are seeing the in-flight services as a key opportunity. And this is the reason why that we are seeing a lot of interest from mobile operators to work closely with the airline in order to monetize this opportunity, because for us, there is a big opportunity. And at the end of the day, this business model is quite simple. You will have your subscription with your mobile operator, and they will manage, I would say, all the billing aspect that you can have on flight. And therefore, there is no need for the airline to be involved to it, just to receive the share of revenue that the mobile operator will receive. So, and based on that, we already seen this business model working on the 3G services. We are able to really to increase significantly the take-up rate, and the take-up rate is leading to significant revenue. And with this revenue, I think that we are able to solve this difficult equation to see how the revenue can really cover this, the cost related to in-flight connectivity. So it's also a key innovation that we are seeing today, changing the model for monetization for in-flight connectivity, which will definitely help the airline, because today they are facing some financial pressure, and we need also to change it.
So, I mean, the cellular roaming option onto the in-flight network touches on a whole number of things that I think we had discussed, and sort of that transition from outside air world into the airport and then into the cabin, trying to make that seamless. Before we get into that side of the discussion, though, one of the questions that came up from the audience, and one that's also in line with one of the things we've been talking about, is how are we going to pay for all of this? Are there other models, other sorts of pricing scenarios that have come along that anyone of you are seeing that would help, other than just taking the airline completely out of the transaction and letting it be part of your cell phone plan, your mobile phone plan? Are there other models that we're seeing that have shown signs of success?
I think it's not a one size fits all at the moment. I think the industry,
Sure.
and it depends on the airlines, right? So, we certainly see some airlines that see it really as a value driver for their loyalty for their passengers. So they're willing to absorb that into the ticket price, right? And either give that away to, maybe people up the front of the plane or towards the middle, and maybe not at the back, right? Or some airlines, we've had a lot of success with Air New Zealand, where they wanted to give a completely full free service, which is fantastic. We love to see that. We love to see our network getting full, and that's really great to see. Other airlines are still very much in charge mode. They're trying to sort of monetize that Wi-Fi service, and I think that's where these other aspects that we can plug in, via interesting sort of APIs into the portal, whether it's retail or other e-commerce activities, that enables. At the end of the day, someone's got to pay, right? Whether it's the airline, the passenger, the service, somebody typically has to bear that cost. But the way that we see it going is the business models are getting much more much more of a group effort. So there's got to be benefits. There's got to be win-wins for all of the parties in there. Philippe talked about the network operators, the mobile network operators. They want to get new subscribers. Clearly, it's interesting for them to be able to get some traffic over their network. You go into the likes of 4G, and we're interested in 5G as well in terms of some of the new announcements we've made. The passenger shouldn't, and the passenger doesn't care how that pipe is pumped into the plane. KA, KU, 5G. It doesn't matter to them. Getting the service and getting it consistently high quality and being able to do the use cases they're looking for is the most important thing. That's all that should matter to the passenger.
So yes, fully agree with Chris, meaning the technology is an enabler. So we need to focus on passenger experience. And we know, based on experience with airlines, that in particular condition, passengers are willing to pay for in-flight connectivity services. But we need to provide a seamless experience, meaning that they only need to switch on the services and to connect to it. We need to provide the right, I would say, billing, pricing and charging mechanisms, which is also seamless, meaning passengers don't want to pay by credit card, meaning it could be quite complex. It should be also seamless. And as mentioned by Chris, he's expecting also very high quality in terms of mobile data transfer as well. So, but if we're able to get there, to have these three components, meaning that the monetization is there, it's possible. We've been able to reach take-up rate higher than 25% with this kind of solution. So the equation can be solved. Is definitely is one of the components, the monetization and in-flight connectivity, but there is also benefit for the airline.
Speaking of benefits to the airline beyond just revenue, there's been a lot of discussion in the in-flight connectivity world over the years about efficiency and et cetera. I don't want to get into all the words there, but making airlines more efficient, reducing turn times, reducing maintenance times, predictive maintenance things, so a part's going to fail while it's still in the air, things like that. Do airlines have to start with a passenger-focused connectivity strategy and then add all of these back office features in first, or is there a strategy for digitalization that is sort of back office led that could be useful to airlines that are still a little skeptical about, quite frankly, all the expense of getting passengers to pay for that connectivity pipe?
I think this is already happening. If you see the rate of digitization on the ground processes, like turnaround monitors, trying to track and trace assets, like our Sophie project or product is kind of an example of it. That you can track and trace your catering equipment. Let's say look at the turnaround. Is the trolley in time? Let's say optimize your stocking all over the world of equipment, and it's just the first step. And airlines drive a lot of those similar projects in other processes around the turnaround. So I think it's the low-hanging fruit and already happening because connectivity is basically already available for ground equipment and ground processes. So it's maybe out of sight of let's say this discussion or this focus, but it's the first stepping stone of digitization, and it's already happening.
No, and I agree that, I mean, one of the great advantage of digitalization is to break silos. So it's important. I mean, like when we see digitalization in the RAM process, on the ground handling side, in the cabin for passengers, for crew, and the great advantage is that each of the stakeholders can get access to the same data, or if they are they collect different data, they then can cross-check them. It is of great benefits for safety, which is for everyone the number one priority, but also to improve the training, to improve the performance, the operations, and also on the passenger side to improve the experience of passengers. So I think no one can avoid to have a digital strategy, and I think that we need to work all together, and I'm happy because it's happening already in a number of areas, but to collectively provide a coherent framework to this strategy.
Yeah, just to compliment Celine, I think she touched on the right word there, is safety. Clearly, safety is always the number one priority of any operation. So, you know, if you think about some of the data that gets transmitted, mission critical safety services, for very good reason, that has to stay in a certain place. But there's a lot of use cases where other operational data, you know, non-critical, you know, non-safety operational data that the airline can maybe look to transmit down a different pipe, and certainly connectivity. You know, things like K-band or, you know, other services certainly could be used to sort of transmit some of those other pieces of data. But I think the safety critical piece is there for a very good reason, and that shouldn't and won't be touched.
And maybe to add on that, that's true that some years ago, the decision or not for an airline to go with in-flight connectivity was mainly based on the passenger demand. It was mainly, okay, should I provide or not in-flight connectivity to my passenger? And this was the only piece of the business case. Today, in-flight connectivity to passenger is still the baseline, meaning that the decision maker is still, I mean, the cabin marketing department within the airline, but they are trying to adopt slightly this nose to tail strategy, meaning that in-flight connectivity can serve many use cases. And we had this discussion over the last 40 minutes about the retail aspect, the fact that there is no longer paper on board the aircraft. So this is new aspect which are coming in the case, and there is a lot coming. And you mentioned the non-critical data, aircraft data as well, which is also a significant piece of information that airline can get in order to improve their turnaround. Are we in a position to say that there is a common, I would say, decision based on all these use cases? I don't think so. There are still a bit of silo within the airline. We are trying to break the silo and showing that there is benefit everywhere. But definitely in the coming years, I hope that we will have connectivity with all these use cases as a baseline. At least this is our vision.
And maybe here a question to our audience, especially the airlines. Chris mentions use cases, Philip too. Yeah, we need to collaborate with customers to help us validate those use cases. We're stepping out of our, let's say, traditional business models and step into new use cases. But yeah, we need to interact with airlines and get their feedback on what is of value to them to make, let's say, decisions, what projects to push through. And so we're stepping into a new, I think, era where we knew what we were making, we knew what our business models were, into a new era where, let's say, partnerships, new business models will happen. And I think we have to make this step together as partners with our customers, as well as with what were used to be our competitors.
I think one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the challenge ahead is that we look at the traditional process and we just see how to digitalize it. So some paper process now is digitalized, or typically the coupons have been replaced by a ticket with a QR code, but the process is still the same. And I think it's more difficult, and this is the critical point, and where we would need some strength and courage, and also from the authorities and governments, to look at how can we improve and change the regulatory process that is currently in place. Typically, before any introduction of digitalization in the passenger process, government of destination would only see a passenger upon arrival. Now, if you have digital tools, this same passenger is able to provide passport information ahead of the travel. They are able to provide any additional information that would be required, for instance, typically for the request of a visa, of health certificates. So why can't we do this check ahead of the travel? And I think there are some countries that are looking at it and pushing in that direction, and it's encouraging. But this will take also much more time. But it's only through the change of the process, because we are changing tools, and the process need to be adapted as well. It's there that we will have the real synergies, at least in terms of passenger experience.
Awesome. I think from a security perspective, that came up a couple times in the conversation. I know, Chris, you mentioned keeping sort of critical safety services out of the normal communications pipe and things like that. But sort of building on that security challenge, is there sort of a cybersecurity influence on what is happening with the cabin connectivity world and some of these other digitalization efforts, whether it's back office or retail or anything like that? Are we seeing influence of that sort of? And cybersecurity is sort of like digitalization is one of those terms that means everything to everybody. But are we seeing influence there that any of you have some specific thoughts on that is significant to this industry? Yeah,
I mean, let me touch on that a little bit. And I think you talked about the embedded cameras, and then kind of comparing that to what the health passports are going to be like, right? So there's onus on maintaining customer data integrity and cybersecurity at kind of every point of the chain, right? So, first and foremost, how often is that camera looking at you? Is it opt-in or is it opt-out, right? When you take that picture, what's happening on your device? Is that going anywhere else? And ultimately, when it breaks out through our network, what are our back-end systems doing, right? Do we have the relevant cybersecurity kind of stops, checks and balances in place? So, I think I can certainly say from the Inmarsat perspective, we take that element, super seriously, and it's a very large part of our organization. So this is really where we're looking into cameras now. We're spending a lot of our time kind of gazing into the internet, but people value their own data, and people have a genuine concern about where that data is going. So I think transparency. We want to make these things. We want to make these things easier for people. We talked about the pain points of the customer journey. The biggest pain point for me has always been the immigration line. not always, right? I've never had a fun experience at an immigration line, I don't think, right? So to Celine's point, how can we make that a much more enjoyable experience? That's the first touch point you have with that country when you arrive, right? So this is a real opportunity for us to kind of revolutionize that experience, right? And, you know, connectivity and, you know, applications and all this great stuff that's grown so much is going to give us that opportunity, but all the way along ensuring that we make those stop checks and balances at each point of the journey to make sure that that data is being treated with the integrity and the security that it deserves.
And this is maybe the critical and first point of any product development within CETA, is that everything that we are developing should be secure by design, privacy by design, all of that. So I think there is no longer a development, I would say, on the side. It should be very fully standardized with robust protocol as well. And this is also what is driving some choice of technology to ensure that this is protected against any cyber attack as well. And I can speak about the 4G protocol as well, which is also in line with what I would say other players are doing, in order to also to match the security expectation from the airline, from the passenger, also in terms of privacy. So this one is critical and should be done by design at the beginning of any product development.
And I like to think that there's an opportunity in each of the challenge that we encounter. And typically in this area, airlines to collect more data on passenger that they need, but just for, I mean, the purpose is to satisfy the government process. And there's some information, notably the passenger name record and the advanced passenger information that they in a number of cases have to collect and transfer to governments before arrival. And there is an opportunity here to establish a direct connection between passengers and governments, and have this information, I mean, remove the airline as a middleman in the collect of the passport information to transfer this to government. So there is also digitalization offers an opportunity to reduce the number of actors that may have access to certain personal information, and thereby as well reducing the risk of security breaches, which we know for airlines may bring huge reputational or may have a reputational effect and impact if there is any breach. So it's a challenge, and obviously as we work on one of our main projects, One ID, which really look at establishing this trust framework and those rules on the transfer of this information. Data security and confidentiality is one of the main pillars.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think in this industry, safety is at the center. So the data safety or data security is, I think, the logic next step. At least that's the way we approach it, to make sure that we approach it in the same way.
Yeah, and I know, Celine, you mentioned there's a sort of a chance of loss of reputation for an airline, depending on what data might be compromised and what the jurisdiction is. There's also a potential financial penalty. There has been a couple cases out of Europe where there have been GDPR violations and fines assessed. So that is, it's not just that you might lose customers, you might lose real money too. So that is something to consider.
And I would say that the airlines take this very, very seriously. I mean, every conversation we have with airlines, in terms of the cybersecurity element, it's a very thorough and robust kind of evaluation and conversation. So for sure, we're seeing an awful lot of focus on that from our partners.
Yeah.
And it has safety implication here as well. I mean, we are talking about the airlines now, but there's always, there are a number of factors on an airport, including the air navigation services. And we know that we don't want neither the cabin of an aircraft being having a security breach, nor the screen of the air navigation services being spoofed, or being confronted to any type of attack. I mean, it has potentially a huge safety impact. So we all take this very seriously.
Yeah, we're getting very close to the end of our hour together, unfortunately. It's been a great conversation thus far. If anyone in the audience has a last question they want to toss in there, please feel free to do so, and hopefully the moderators can get it over to me if any of those come in. I do have a couple still in my queue here. One of them is we really have focused a lot on the passenger and what's happening sort of in the cabin while in the air. But early on in the conversation, we also touched on sort of the transition from, before I've even thought about buying a ticket to I've bought a ticket to I've gotten in the car to the airport or the train or whatnot to I've crossed that threshold and checked my bag to inside security to, inside duty-free shopping to inside the aircraft. There's that ribbon and then reverse that back out going the other direction. What can be done to sort of smooth that process, especially from a digitalization perspective, keeping the passenger, in a single sort of, interface, everything's going to go through their phone anyways, but if I don't have to use 18 apps, that would be better, right? So what are some of the things we're seeing that airlines are interested in, that other players in the industry are interested in, and trying to sort of reduce the transitions there?
Yeah, I can give you a.
Yeah.
So
everybody go.
Yeah. Okay. Please go. I'll give you. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I can give. Yeah.
No, Chris, you go.
Okay. I can give you a great example of where an airline is looking to do everything else. Right. So I think we were there together a while ago, right? AirAsia.
Yeah.
With their super app. But I think we go back to data, right? And I think data is very valuable, right? And all the stuff we talked about, obviously, as long as it's anonymized, safe, and secure. But I think there's airlines see a lot of value in maybe other services they can offer. Tony Fernandez has just launched a ride hailing. So he's gone into cars. He says, I haven't got any planes anymore, so I'll use cars, right? Because they're all on the ground. But you think about the types of services that passengers want to have. So the super apps, the Ubers and the Grabs of this world, it's a really interesting transformation that particular airline's going through. And I think they see it as just a natural extension of being an airline. It's a big change, and it's not something we're seeing an awful lot elsewhere. But from the way it's been going, I think it's been super successful. And this is all about them having intimacy and knowing their passengers, being a trusted brand, a very well-known brand in ASEAN. So, what if they're coming to us to buy airline tickets, why wouldn't they come to us if we offer a good service at a good price to buy groceries, or to buy, for financial services? So it's a really tangible example that we're seeing in this part of the world. And from what I've seen, it's been pretty successful so far.
Yeah, and I think what I wanted to say is where apps become digital assistants. I think in 2008, I was one of the founders of a technology company involved in boarding cards, digital boarding cards. And my message was, it's not about a boarding card, it's about the mobile phone. And that's the channel that will be the partner from home to destination and back. And now you see apps transforming in digital assistants. And I think that's where it goes. It's very simple.
Yeah, to us, there's one of the critical elements is it's really this collaboration. And when we speak about the passenger process at airports, we obviously think of airlines, airports, and governments, be them the security companies or the immigration, customs, border control. And we need to work together so that passengers can demonstrate once who they are and that they have all the appropriate documentation. And then this information is directed on a need to know, need to access basis. And this can be done in the background without passengers to have to interfere and demonstrate further their identity. So obviously, as they go through each of the step of the process, biometric recognition is one of the tool most commonly used, and facial being one of the very convenient way for passengers to validate that they went through the touch point throughout the airport. So there are some very promising initiatives. They've been also slowed down with the crisis, but we hope that they will start again. And definitely, I think there's even a larger business case with the COVID crisis. And as you mentioned, the app or the tool itself, we have to be careful to, and probably the super app that Chris referred might be a solution, but we are also afraid that too many apps kill the app. So we have to think of the passenger and what is a possible way for them. And that's why IATA works on the standardization, because we want the mini app to be able to work in the same way, so they can provide the same type of information and simplify passengers' life.
That's wonderful insight. And I know it's going to have to be the point that we end on, as we have run out of time here today. There was one question in the queue that we did not get to about connectivity over India. The short answer there is it's coming. There's Vistara has finally launched it on its long haul flights, but there are still some regulatory challenges and getting teleports in the country. So there's your answer there. Chris is vaguely nodding along, so I think I got that right. And on that note, as mentioned earlier, the next session in the Passenger Experience Conference Week here in AIX is tomorrow at 11 o'clock Europe time, 10 o'clock UK time, 5 a.m. On the East Coast of the US. I don't know how to go the other direction in time zones because I never go that way. It is passenger engagement as a service and how that can generate revenue and be a new revenue driver for the industry. Thanks again to the four of you for joining us. Thanks to PEC and AIX for hosting this, and we'll catch you next time.